call the roll?
With pleasure, Mayor. Councilmember Hedges,
Here.
Councilmember Lorraine,
Here.
Councilmember Newsom,
Here.
Deputy Mayor Diaz-Nash,
Here.
Mayor Lee.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're excited to be here in person with options for those who choose not to be in person to participate virtually. There are several ways to participate. For those attending in person, complete a yellow request to speak slip and hand it to the clerk. If participating remotely, use the raise your hand feature in Zoom and you'll be called upon at the appropriate time. If calling in via phone, press *9 to raise your hand, and when called upon, press *6 to unmute. These options for a public comment will remain available until I close the public comment period for each specific item. We'll begin with the first of two items on the agenda, which will be a study session on the Clean Water Program update, sewer rate increase, with a presentation by our Public Works Director, Azalea Mitch, and consultant Alex Handlers.
Can you hear me? Yes. Hi. Good evening, council members. Azalea Mitch, Public Works Director, and as you noted, we have our consultant Alex Handlers from Bartle Wells on as well. This evening, we'll be presenting to you the update on the Clean Water Program, as well as our proposal for future sewer rate increases. We'll walk you through what we have accomplished so far, assess the future wastewater system needs, walk you through the sewer rate analysis, and seek your feedback on the next steps. As you can see from this figure, we actually have a pretty extensive wastewater conveyance and treatment system, over 230 miles, many pump stations, and a wastewater treatment plant in the city. Our service area does include customers such as sections of the town of Hillsborough, San Mateo County, and the Crystal Springs Sanitation District. We do have a partner, Foster City. They own a quarter of the treatment plant. All in all, our service area expands over 150,000 residents in the city and in our the areas of our customers and partner. The drivers of the Clean Water Program have been really regulatory. In 2009, we were served with a cease and desist order to address sanitary sewer system overflows. The goals of the program have therefore been to fix our aging infrastructure, add capacity, so that we can manage wet weather flows and to meet future regulatory requirements, specifically those associated with nutrients. So this has been a $1 billion 10-year effort. We're actually in year 9. As you can see from the figure, we have quite a few projects that have added 10 miles of sewers, and we have our expansion at the treatment plant. We anticipate to complete the program in fiscal year 2025-26. Thus far, the projects in green are all those that we have completed. We're currently in construction on Delaware at UFIS and the treatment plant, and we've got a few remaining projects in design and in the planning phase. We're almost there. Now you've heard about our underground flow equalization system project. This is our largest project in the collection system. It consists of a 5.3 million gallon tank that will be used during wet weather, and it's cost us approximately $60 million. The way this will work is when, so we do have existing sanitary sewer overflows throughout the city. There is an area along Delaware where there are constraints and capacity challenges there, so that is the area that we see them when it rains. So the location of UFIS is pretty critical, and it's being built at the county event center. The way the system will work is when it will rain, our operators at the treatment plant will decide when to divert flows, store that flow, and then when the flows at the treatment plant get low enough, they'll start pumping that water back into the system for it to be treated at the plant. So it will be, they'll have to decide, depending on the size of the storm, when to begin storing, and when to pump out. So this is the site when we started to mobilize. As you can see, the clearing of the area. So aerial photo of the excavation. So this facility ranges between 40 and 50 feet deep. This is in 2022, last year. The piles were driven, the floor was finished, and then the support columns were built. And this is the roof that is in progress right now, and we're continuing to pour the concrete above. So that's UFIS. So the largest project in the Clean Water Program is the expansion of the treatment plant. And I'll walk you through some really neat pictures. So the objectives of this project have been really to modernize our wastewater facility. We currently don't have a sophisticated system to receive the flow nor to remove nutrients. So this project expands the treatment process to include what is now just standard preliminary treatment, and then it will enhance our biological nutrient system. With this project, we will be early actor. What that means is there are new requirements to remove nutrients because San Francisco Bay is losing its resiliency, and so we will be removing half of the nitrogen that is currently found in wastewater. So for us wastewater folks, that's a big deal. We will be able to manage 78 million gallons a day, and we will also be ready to meet Title 22, which is effluent that will be ready to be used for recycled water whenever that demand does materialize. We were very fortunate that the city had land right across the existing facility, so the construction has been going on right across the street, and the pipes will come across. There will be some processes on the existing facility that we will abandon, and some that we will reuse for equalization. This is when we awarded this project in 2019. This is when the site was getting excavated in 2020. This is a picture of the piles. There were over 1,900 piles that were driven 100 feet deep, and we were very, very fortunate that over that year we were able to manage noise, we monitored for vibration, and we only received one phone call. So we were very grateful to the community for their support on the driving of all these piles. This is a picture that just shows how deep some of these basins are, the tons of rebar that have gone in. This is a critical facility, so the structural design is actually rather complicated. It's also very compact, and there has been a lot of concrete that is going into this. This is a picture from one of the sites where the structures, the above structures, started to go up. And this is a picture of our electrical building. Those are our standby generators. And finally, this is a picture of the basins. So the construction has been going really well. Oh, and finally, we do have a new administration building, so that will be LEED certified, and you can see the solar panels up on the roof. So in terms of schedule, we started this program back in 2015. The construction of the plant started in 2019. Following that, we began building UFIS. We anticipate completing UFIS in 2023, so at the end of this year. The plant, we will begin commissioning, so the startup process will be rather challenging. We anticipate to start that process at the beginning of next year, and then actually completing the treatment plant at the end of next year. We will be closing out the project 2025, and then the whole program 2026. Now, even though that is the focus on the Clean Water Program, we have ongoing projects in the collection system. We're constantly rehabilitating our system, inspecting, and then doing what we can to reduce water that infiltrates into our aging infrastructure. In terms of costs, this was back in 2017. The budget established for the program was almost $1 billion, so 991. We are tracking. We've made some decisions to really weigh out some of the projects that had been planned. We eliminated some of those, so we are tracking below the 991. However, the treatment plant project is right now over our budget, and that has to do with challenges that we had with utilities, expanding, paying for the design and construction of the drinking water and fire water lines from Cal Water, coordination with PG&E. The site is very busy, so we've encountered a lot of underground conflicts. We are doing a lot more building inspections and special inspections given the complexity of this project. There's also added scope to meet recycled water criteria, and then concrete repairs that we just have found as a result of just the parts that we will continue to use on the existing site. Tracking below budget. So in terms of our sewer rates and future needs, there are increased utility costs that we will see. The treatment plant itself, we will use more electricity, more chemicals, so our operating costs will go up. We are hoping to save for the repair and replacement of the. This is a membrane facility, and replacing those membranes will be expensive. So we need to make sure that those funds are in place so we can make those replacements. We've been very fortunate to receive council approval to add maintenance staff. Our maintenance staff, we had a very small group, and with the instrumentation and the added processes, we needed more positions. So those were approved, and we've been in the process of recruiting and onboarding. And there will also be just more regulatory compliance as it relates to meeting our nutrient requirements. And in terms of capital improvements, there will be forever ongoing sewer collection repairs and replacements, ongoing treatment plant improvements, and also we are right now in scoping a project to capture the gas that we produce with the digester so that we can produce electricity. So that is in the evaluation phase, and we'll see what kind of capital project materializes so that we put that methane to good use. And with that, I will pass it on to Alex from Bardell Wells.
Okay, thanks, Azalea. And can folks hear me? Okay, just want to make sure. Well, anyway, congratulations to the city on the project. And what I'm going to talk about is the sewer finances and the rates. And it's been a while since we've spoken with the city, so I kind of wanted to start with just a brief refresher, and that is that your sewer enterprise is financially self-supporting. So it's the customers who are paying for the cost of service, and because of that, and
I'm
because
so
your
sorry,
rates are
Alex, to interrupt you. We're going to need to take a quick break. please continue.
Sure, thanks, yeah. Your rates have to be set at levels to support the cost of service. And when we look back at what the city's done over the last 5 to 10 years, a lot of good proactive financial management, planning for these rate increases and implementing them. You've phased in some pretty substantial increases, but you've done it gradually over a number of years, which is good practice from my perspective. And also you've been very successful in getting very low interest rate loans, both from the WIFIA, the Water Infrastructure Financing Innovation Act funding program, and from the State Revolving Fund Loan, or the SRF program, and some bonds. So the good news is, even though the project is quite expensive, the debt service is coming in, significantly lower than was projected just a handful of years ago. So when I look back at those prior financial projections from 2017, it looked like the city would need 2 more years of 12% rate increases. But the good news is, because of the success in getting this low rate financing and keeping the project below budget, that the rates don't need to go up as much as they previously had been projected to. And in fact, you've already done the heavy lifting. So what we're looking at in the future is more kind of smaller inflationary increases, because you are facing some modest increases. And on the next slide, it just highlights kind of what I'm calling modest financial headwinds. So there are, smaller increases needed each year. As Azalea mentioned, this new treatment plant does a lot more than the existing facility. There's higher costs for electricity, chemicals, membrane, staffing, you name it. So those costs are going to be, phasing in as the plant comes online. In addition, even though you did get very low interest rate financing for a lot of this project, the debt service isn't fully online yet. Some of it phases in. So you've got to pay that debt service and also meet some, standard financial covenants associated with debt service. And also, make sure there's enough funding in future years for addressing the needs of the city's own collection system. You've got a lot of old pipelines, just like many Bay Area agencies. A lot of them were put in, 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago, and there's going to be a need to replace those lines as they, hit the end of their useful lives. And on top of all this, small increases are typically needed just to keep up with cost inflation. So this slide here shows kind of a long-term history of the sewer rates. You can see in the early 90s, there was minimal rate increases. Starting in the 2000s, rates started to be phase in gradually year after year. And then you got hit with the drought, like many agencies, from 2013 to 2016. There was a big decline in billed usage. So even though the city had adopted rate increases, the revenues weren't increasing very much at all, because they were being offset by a decline in use. So, the city had to do a catch-up rate increase in fiscal year ending 2018, and then phased in the last 5 years of rate increases to get where you are today. And what's being projected in the future is, on this slide here, is 3% rate increases going forward, which we see as kind of the maximum that you'll need each year over the next 5 years. And on the next slide, kind of showing what those proposed maximum sewer rate increases look like, with 3% across the board rate increases. And I'm saying maximum sewer rate increases because there's still some unknowns out there, even though the best financial planning has been, put together to try to estimate what this new treatment plant's going to cost to operate. There's some unknowns regarding that. And also, no one ever really knows what the billed wastewater usage is going to be, because that can fluctuate from year to year. And in recent years, it's come down. So what's being proposed is getting authorization through the Prop 218 process for up to 3%, for rates that kind of equate to 3% annual rate increases for each of the next 5 years, with the understanding that the city is going to be able to evaluate each year once you get the water use data. And the hope is that, slightly lower rate increases can be implemented. So for example, if you look out to, we'll just pick the last year, shows your residential charges have a fixed charge and a volumetric charge. So we're showing a maximum fixed charge of $69.71 if all this was put into place as projected. But if you go out 5 years and it turns out you're able to get by with something less, maybe you only need to implement a $68 fixed charge and, proportionately lower rates for the other usage categories as well. On the next slide, seems like every agency I work with, there's always someone who says we have the highest rates, and just want to set the record straight. We did a kind of a comprehensive survey of San Mateo County, and your rates are, I'll call them in the upper middle range for a typical single family home. I'll point out this chart has a dark green section on the bottom, which is the fixed charge or minimum charge that some agencies have. And we also have the lighter green section on the top, which is the volumetric portion. So your rates are kind of balanced. There are a number of agencies out there that have 100% fixed charges, which is great for revenue stability. But on the other side, agencies that have a mix of, part volumetric, part fixed, you're getting a blend of some revenue stability, but you're also still giving your customers, some control over their bills. So if they can serve, they can help keep their annual bills down. Next slide shows similar survey for a low-use customer. This might be an apartment that uses 3 units of water in the winter months. And your residential bills are based on winter water use when there's minimal outdoor irrigation. So again, low-use customers in the middle range compared to other agencies in San Mateo County. Moving on to this slide. Yes, great. This shows what's happened with your billable wastewater use. And, before the drought, going back to 2014, 14, 15, water use was a bit higher. During that last drought, the water use came down considerably. And this is a similar pattern that a lot of agencies have exhibited in the Bay Area and California. And after that drought was over, water use did rebound, but not quite to the levels where it had previously been. So kind of established sort of a new norm. But in recent years with drought, and I don't know if, the coronavirus pandemic plays into that as well, the usage has actually come down a little bit. So it's kind of now at a lower level. We expect it'll bump up a little bit, but it might not. That just kind of shows you the history of the usage. This slide here shows a graph of your clean water program expenses. It's broken out by agency. San Mateo is in blue, Foster City is in green. And you guys have been plugging through this. You're approaching the end of the line, which is a major accomplishment for such a huge program. To have it roll out on time, on schedule, as planned is very impressive. I've worked with a lot of other agencies that have big capital programs, and they don't always go as anticipated. On the next slide, I mentioned good news is that the city and San Mateo and Foster City aggressively went after low interest rate financing, and were very successful in getting loans from WIFIA and State Revolving Fund loan programs. So all in all, it's about almost $500 million of this program is being financed at extremely low interest rates. The WIFIA rates are a little over 1.3% for over 30-year financing, and the State Revolving Fund loan is only at 0.8%, less than 1%. And you also had to, obviously had to supplement that with some bond issuances. But even when you did those bonds, they were issued in a much more favorable interest rate environment. So the good news is this is all locked in. You've already locked in all this funding. The all-in average interest rate is less than 2%. So it's even lower than inflation. So congratulations to the city on this. I mean, this is a huge achievement from my mind on the finance side. And when we look back and see, what do we anticipate the debt service was going to be, we thought your maximum debt service would be going up to about $50 million per year. But with this low rate financing, it's going up to only about $38 million a year, which is the reason why the rates don't need to keep going up. So good news there. This slide shows graphically the debt service. I'll point out two things on this. One is you can see that red section there for the WIFIA loan for the wastewater treatment plant. That was intentionally designed to phase in kind of gradually over time to allow the city's rates to gradually phase in conjunction with that. And also towards the left side, there's some purple bars there. And those are some short-term notes that the city and Foster City issued. Why? To take advantage of extremely low interest rates. You're actually financing the plant currently with interest rates that are about 0.4%, rather than instantly tapping into the WIFIA loans, which are 1.3%. 1.3% was low, but we're able to take advantage of even lower interest rates during the construction period before the full WIFIA loan comes in and takes out those short-term notes. Next slide shows a graphic of revenues and expenses. The bars represent the different expenditure categories, and the red line represents the revenues. And again, the goal is small, gradual annual rate increases, each year to keep the rates in line with your funding needs and offset the need. We see some agencies try to go no rate increases for many years, and they're faced with a larger rate spike. So our general recommendation is, the small, steady, gradual rate increases are the best approach. Keeps up with your costs and cost inflation. So that's kind of concludes what I was going to cover. The proposed rates are to move ahead with authorization for up to 3% maximum rate increases each year, with the hope that the city is going to be able to reevaluate and potentially implement something even a little bit lower. And with that, I will turn it back to Azalea.
Thank you, Alex. So we are here tonight to seek your feedback and direction on the proposed rate increases. On April 21st, depending on your feedback, we would mail the Prop 218 notices with the proposed rates, then come back for the ordinance introduction, public hearing, and council consideration. And June 20th, we would have the second reading and final adoption. And then the new rates would become effective August 1st and on July 1st, subsequent years. So we thank you and seek your feedback as it relates to the proposed maximum of 3% and also the 5-year plan.
Thank you so much, Azalea. So this is the time where we ask questions. So this is council questions time, and you might not know that Azalea is a water engineer, and so she would be happy to answer any questions on the topic. This is one of her favorite topics. And then after that, we'll move on to public comment, and finally, we will have a direction from council. So this is the time for questions. Councilmember Hedges.
Yes, thank you. Alex, could you go back to I think it was the last slide we did? That one. So I'm looking at that number across the green, and it seems to me that's debt service?
You're correct. That's the debt service, and it right now it's about 17.8 million, but it bumps up. But there's a temporary period for a couple of years where it's a little bit higher, and that corresponds to when you're paying off those wastewater system notes, which are just kind of a one-time thing before it gets replaced with the long-term debt from the bonds and the SRF and WIFIA.
Yeah, it seems like it's pretty steep in 20, 30, 31, 42. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and there is a prior slide that shows how the debt is phasing in that might be helpful to see also. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much to both of you for the presentation. I'm interested in what seems to be a risk that is also a reward as Californians hopefully continue to conserve and use less and less water. That actually becomes more and more of a threat to the rates. So I'd appreciate your thinking on that topic.
Yeah, so Alex, I am pulling up one of the things that Alex noted about in terms of what is fixed versus volumetric. And obviously with conservation, the volumetric piece becomes much more challenging in terms of the projected revenues that will come in. I think that's why it's important to reevaluate our water usage, since wastewater rates are based on water consumption every year. But I know, Alex, you do have some suggestions for us to consider in the future. If you look at this graph in terms of what other agencies are doing to stabilize rates.
Yeah, this was a big part of the prior rate increase process, because before the rates, going back more than 5 or 6 years ago, the rates were 100% volumetric. So the city moved to kind of a hybrid 50-50 approach. It helped a lot with the revenue stability, but you're bringing up a very good point. Water use has come down in California over the last 20 years, over the last few years. Some of it in recent years may be due to the last few years was building up to be one of the worst droughts on record before we had these, huge amount of rain, record-setting rain and snowpack coming in this past year. So I think this is something that's just the city's going to, in reality, no one knows what future water use is going to be, but it's something that the city's going to need to monitor. There's been a lot of good efforts already to deal with the low-hanging fruit of conservation. So people have gotten their water use down quite a bit over the last decade. It's always a risk. Yeah, if water use needs to be cut in half again for some emergency reason, might you need to come back to the drawing board with rates? The reality is it's always possible for any agency, because we don't know what the future is going to hold, but we're fairly confident that with the 3% proposed maximum rate increases, that'll give the city a little bit of cushion there to get through the next 5 years and maintain financially stable. And then you come back to the drawing board and update the financial projections and adjust course as needed based on the realities that are unfolding. So we think you'll be in fine shape as it is, but I think it's going to be something the city does need to monitor in future years.
And if I may add, water conservation is great. It's what we want our residents to do. However, it does make the strength of that wastewater harder to treat. So that's something that our operators will also have to track.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I had 3 questions. One was, does the future of our wastewater system allow us to do gray water irrigation? And do we do any of that now? And can we be doing more of that for public things like parks and fields?
So gray water irrigation, our building code does allow it. And that is water that is not black. So black is your basically your toilet water. So the building code does allow for gray water system for either residential or commercial gray water systems to help with that water conservation, so that it is allowed. For irrigation on parks, we really would need to use municipal recycled water. And although this plant will be, we call it Title 22 ready, to build that recycled water distribution system, that is rather expansive. We also do have an issue with our wastewater. It is very high in salinity, so we would need additional treatment to be able to recycle that water. So there are things that can be done on the residential and commercial realm that the building code does allow. In terms of a purple pipe system, we would need to treat the water, remove the salinity, and then build the distribution network.
Okay, thank you. 2 other questions. These numbers don't include any energy generation should we have that in the future. Is that right?
Absolutely, yes.
And then the third thing was, this is a little bit gross, but prior to the pandemic, I never knew that we would be able to test wastewater systems, for example, to read COVID levels. Do we continue to test for those in the future, and will be advised if we see a spike?
Absolutely. I can send you the link. We're continuously providing samples for that tracking. So we are collaborating with a few universities, so we do receive that data. We can see the coronavirus levels as well as other things like monkeypox. So yes, we hope that forensic wastewater engineering is here to stay.
It's fantastic. Thank you for your answers.
Thank you so much, Azalea. So I guess I had the number $100 million stuck in my mind because I remember, I think it was Rich said that that was his calculation of the estimated cost savings for the ratepayers through the WIFIA loans. I wanted to just double check, is that just as we talk about rate increases, I think it's really helpful to help quantify for ratepayers the steps that the city has taken to save ratepayers.
Mayor Lee, this is Rich. I can answer that question if you'd like.
Great. Hi, Rich.
Hi, good evening. So the answer is it's approximately $170 million that the city has saved ratepayers because of the issuance of low interest loans.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. I don't want to leave that unsaid as we discuss this publicly. And then, help remind me, our average gallon per day is it 60 million gallons treated per day? Is that?
Our plant sees around between 9 and 10 million gallons a day.
Okay, so 60 million is like on a very large scale wet weather event.
Right, that's the maximum capacity of our outfall, 60.
And so if we're increasing our capacity to 78 million gallons, I should say, that's an increase in our maximum capacity.
So it is. So with UFIS, the design storm, we have to design these systems to a storm, will generate 98 million gallons a day. We will be able to store 20 by using UFIS. We have equalization of 18 at the plant. So we'll be able to store so that we can treat 60, because that is our capacity. So all in all, we'll be able to process 98 million gallons a day.
Well, that's really important information, I think, also for the public to hear, because as we experience more extreme weather events, knowing that we will have a much more significant capacity for treatment is really a testament of the success of this project. And what that means is that we'll have fewer sewer overflows into the bay and a cleaner ecosystem. So if people weren't catching on to what SSO means, sometimes we throw around our acronyms. It's
sanitary sewer overflow.
Yes. Okay, those are my questions. Now we can open up public comment. Do we have any?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have no in-person comments. I do have one hand raised on the remote. And Michael, if you could go ahead and provide your comments.
Yes, thank you. On your slide 30, which has the total cost of both usage and fixed costs, what is it that the cities of Burlingame and Brisbane are doing such that their rates or bucks are less than half of San Mateo's rates?
So I can answer that for now. Let's see. So because these rates, as Alex noted, include the increasing operating costs as well as the debt service, we have invested $1 billion and no one else has. But even with that level of investment, our rates are, as you can see, not on the middle range. So when the other municipalities have to then finance their improvements, their rates will increase.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We have no other speakers.
Wonderful. Okay, this is the time, well, close public comment, and this is time for council input. Councilmember Hedges? Yeah, I have another question. Oh, please go ahead.
I know that in the 1960s, especially during the Johnson administration, they started funding sewers plants. Do you know when ours was first done?
Our plant was built in the 20s. So we had, you can see the relic of our building, the civilization building. I believe it was built in the 20s. It was expanded in the 50s, and then with the Clean Water Act in the 70s and 80s, that's when the secondary system was built.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
I don't have much feedback except just to thank staff for the presentation and just note that it's good to see the progress of this tremendous project, and know that as we're looking for more potential stormwater funding, help is also on the way with existing work and investments that we've made, investments that, as finance manager mentioned, have taken advantage of a lot of opportunities to make sure that we mitigate the cost to consumers as we try to make San Mateo safer and better. So I am comfortable with what's being presented tonight. Thank you.
I would second Councilmember Lorraine's comments and just say this is an example of what city and staff and council should be doing, is focusing on the most basic parts of our infrastructure while we're also thinking about the future and how do we deal with drought, how do we deal with everything that's coming our way that we don't even know about. So I'm excited about what's happened. Congratulations for being on time and on budget. That's huge, on a small project as well as a big one. And I look forward to hearing more about the future projects, the gray water, the energy projects, to see how we can really leverage this into even more.
I think this was a very good presentation. I understand this is something we need to do, and it's very important to the health of the community. So I appreciate all the work that's gone into it. I might add, I think this was a project labor agreement as well on this plant. And so that's one of the reasons I think why the wiseness of the city to have professionals that are well versed in doing this work, doing it. So it's helping keep us on budget and on time, I think.
I echo everyone's sentiments. I think it's great that we're getting this on time, and I just hope that we continue to keep an eye towards future projects like gray water for particularly our playing fields and medians, and then of course energy and generation when it comes to that. Thank you.
I applaud the city's effort and previous leadership who helped get us as far as we are. And I wanted to just make a plug for all the community members who might not have gone out to visit the wastewater treatment plant. They're always looking for cards and food gifts, and the original building is still standing, and there's an inscription on it that reads "Civilization" or "Sanitation is civilization," and I think it still rings very true. So I'm grateful for the presentation. I absolutely support the 5-year plan. I appreciate Deputy Mayor's comments about keeping an eye on the rates as they may fluctuate with hopefully some reduced water consumption as the years go by. And I also concur with Councilmember Newsom's support, and I think many of us share the goal of moving towards a recycled water plan. And I think it would be helpful to hear that any updates on that when we're ready to share. That's something I think is of very strong interest to the community. So with that, do you have everything you need?
Thank you so much. Yes.
Wonderful. So now we will move to the second item on the agenda, which will be a closed session. Are there any members of the public who would like to comment on this item before we convene to closed session?
I have no in-person comments. If you would like to comment on the closed session, please raise your hand in the virtual environment. We have no speakers, Madam Mayor.
Okay, then we will reconvene shortly.